I don't stand side by side with nobody till I bleed with them first.
What did we just see? You probably think this world is a dream come true.
When I step into this ring, yeah, bro, I am addicted.
Don't sleep on Luca!
Maybe tomorrow we'll all wear 42.
If you fight for your dreams will fight for you!
The Grizzled Young Veterans are a tag team in wrestling consisting of James Drake and Zach Gibson. Drake hails from Blackpool, while Gibson hails from Liverpool. The 30 and 33-year-old have been wrestling for 13 and 14 years respectively. The two first teamed together back in 2015 and have since then become one of the prominent tag teams in the European wrestling scene. It was their work in progress that got them picked up for the UK version of NXT. After time spent there, including a 231-day run with the brand's tag titles, they would make the move over to the American brand. One of their best appearances was making it to the finals of the Dusty Cup, facing off against Matt Riddle and Pete Dunne. The two would attempt to transition to the American brand, but obviously COVID halted that. The duo would make the return to the NXT brand by late 2020. During this time, the Vets would find themselves engaged in a feud that will be a big part of today's subject. Once again, they found themselves in the finals of the Dusty Cup. The team seemed destined to add their names to the NXT tag title lineage. However, as 2021 went on and NXT transitioned, the Vets sort of lost their place in the mix of things. They seemingly lost more often, and later they would transition to being a part of Joe Gacy's cult-like faction. Despite the gimmicks being out of their usual scope, the two gave it their all until enough was enough. In April of 2023, the duo would take to social media to announce that they had requested their releases but were denied. The two made it clear that come October 14th, their contracts would be up, and so that takes us to present day, immediately dropping a promo and donning their original iconic looks. The Grizzled Young Veterans have returned. Now, while this is a bright future to look forward to, I also want to look back on their time in the WWE. While it wasn't always the best, the two still had some great matches, and there are two matches specifically that, if you've never seen their work or their work as the Vets, should get you excited for their upcoming run around the indies. The first match takes place at NXT TakeOver Vengeance Day 2021. It is the finals of the Dusty Cup, a tag team tournament that sees the winners get a shot at the NXT tag titles. Facing off is the Vets against MSK. MSK was the tag team consisting of Wesley and Nash Carter. The two had just debuted in January of 2021 and now found themselves in the finals against the Vets. For the second year in a row, the Vets found themselves in the finals, and the match at Vengeance Day was already setting up to be a good one for many reasons. The first of which was the story. MSK was the new tag team bursting onto the scene in NXT and already were making an instant impact. The Vets, they had been there before, but they had come up empty-handed. This time, they were hoping to come away with the win. Another thing that set the match up to be great was the dynamic of the two teams. The Vets are the tough, hard-nosed tag team going against an energetic, carefree tag team. Not only were MSK their opposite personality-wise, but also in-ring. High-flying aerial offense was their game, while the Vets have always been a bit more grounded. The match that ensued was a great one. The story of this match is the Vets having to overcome MSK's high-speed offense. Gibson starts the match trying to overpower Carter and even tries to engage in a bit of chain wrestling. But Carter uses his unique offense to get out of it. Gibson tags Drake in and he attempts to switch to the power offense. And yet, it is Carter who starts to outpace Drake. Carter and Lee begin to use their fast-paced offense together and begin to take advantage of the Vets. This is beautifully seen when the Vets try to double-team Lee, who leapfrogs Gibson and then gives a mean kick to Drake, who falls out of the ring. Once again, Lee uses his speed to get the best of Gibson as he hits him with a Hurricane Rana. MSK then start to perform their tag offense on Gibson. The Vets try to gather themselves ringside, but with MSK, there is no slowing down. While the two are distracted, Lee runs the ropes and hits a cartwheel dive and then sets himself up for Carter to use for a springboard dive. Back in the ring, after a blindside hit, Gibson starts to use his speed to break down Carter. It gets to the point where Carter has to use a rope break. From here, we see some great tag work from GYV. They realize the way to slow down MSK is to wear them down and prevent tags that would provide one partner with rest. They start breaking down Carter in-ring and prevent him from even crossing the halfway point. There's a good spot where Carter kicks out, but Gibson locks the arm so as to not lose possession. Carter begins to fight out of GYV's tag offense and sees a glimmer of hope as he avoids Gibson's corner attack. That is, until he eats a mean lariat from Drake. Carter turns things around and looks to get the tag to Lee until Gibson interferes. Lee throws Gibson into the ring, but this is to MSK's detriment as the ref begins to focus on getting Lee out of the ring. Behind the ref's back, GYV have set Carter up and they hit a huge dropkick to the back of his head. Carter is able to power out of it, but it is clear he is running on fumes and desperately needs a tag. To Carter's benefit, GYV makes a costly mistake. They get him in the corner for another double team attack. However, this time, Carter is able to slide under Drake's kick. Gibson rushes to try and stop the tag, but his momentum only pushes Carter to the corner and he's able to get the tag to Lee. The Vets essentially have to start all over as Lee comes in with a full tank of offense and energy. The Vets try to be strategic again and go outside to scheme, however Lee is a man of grand aerial offense. Lee gets himself ready, runs, and launches himself over the turnbuckle to the outside, taking out GYV. If you haven't seen this spot, I highly suggest you check it out. It's very similar to the Ricochet Gargano spot from TakeOver Phoenix. At this point, Lee is fired up. He gets Gibson back in the ring for a huge backflip kick. The move only gets a 2, so Lee attempts to take to the skies again, only for Drake to interfere. Gibson attempts to use his power again, but Lee reverses the powerbomb. Lee then launches Carter into Drake for a big dropkick. As Gibson is left alone in the ring, he is taken surprise by something they didn't account for with MSK. They wrote them off as goofballs essentially, and yet here was Carter showing an aggressive side as he laid into him with chops and forearms. Lee is tagged in and attempts another kick, but Gibson nails him with a boot mid-flip. Gibson hits a huge neckbreaker and Drake hits a 450 splash. It still isn't enough to put Lee down though. Commentary highlights the fact that the sheer competitiveness of this match is causing both teams to bring out something new in order to try and beat the other. MSK is bringing out an aggressive side, while GYV is now pulling out the high-speed offense. As both teams fight in the ring, MSK take out Gibson and then put their focus on Drake. Lee hits a poison rana on Drake, followed by a swanton and spiral tap, and yet it still isn't enough to put down Drake. After this, we see a crazy spot where Gibson gets Lee on his shoulders on the outside and Drake dives outside to hit the Doomsday device. This leaves Carter to fight on his own. Once again, the aggression comes out as he tries to fight off both men. Gibson begins to scream at Carter that he is in over his head. GYV attempts to hit the ticket to mayhem, but Lee magically makes the save and switches the momentum. MSK hits a huge blockbuster and win the Dusty Cup. A great match with a clash of styles that also calls for each team to try and pull out all the stops for the win. The next match once again sees MSK and GYV facing off, but the best thing about this match that honestly puts it above the previous match is the inclusion of a third team. At the time, Oney Lorcan and Danny Burch were the NXT Tag Team Champions. Due to injury, the two relinquished the titles. MSK was slotted into the match automatically due to their Dusty Cup win. Now, the easy thing to do would just run back the Vengeance Day match, but NXT decided to do something that would ultimately benefit this match. Legado del Fantasma's Raul Mendoza and Joaquin Wilde would be added to the match. Man, that's a lot of 3-letter acronym tag teams. MSK, GYV, LDF. Anyways, Legado was added into the match and many wrote them off. Despite the group's momentum, especially with Santos Escobar, many simply thought that the team was in this match to take the pin for either MSK or GYV. However, NXT was able to shape this match out beautifully. Before we get into the match, I have to shout out Joaquin Wilde's insanely cool mask for his entrance. As the match begins, NXT already does the best thing that not enough companies do. Rather than do the confusing thing of only 2 members being legal in the match and anybody can tag in for anybody, they just simply allow for each team to have 1 member in at all times. So basically, it's a triple threat each time. It's such a minuscule thing, but it seriously improves the match drastically. Lee, Wilde, and Gibson start the match off. Playing off the tensions, Lee immediately tries to go after Gibson. Legado is the first team to tag in and start performing their tag offense. From the get-go, they're being established as a threat. Gibson then gets time to shine, showcasing his power. MSK, however, sets Gibson up for a Bronco Buster in the corner. The format of this match beautifully complements this spot as because there is a third legal man, Carter is constantly having to watch over his shoulder to ensure that Mendoza isn't going to interfere. GYV comes in with some tandem offense before getting interrupted by Carter. We see a great spot where Gibson, knowing Drake is the legal man, pushes him out of the way so Carter's dive only affects him. Throughout the next section of the match, we see Drake in control using his power on Carter. Carter gets the tag, however, and immediately MSK starts using their high energy offense to take out Drake. Once again, almost as if it's their kryptonite, GYV is hit with another dive on the outside by MSK. Then, Legado gets involved and both Mendoza and Wild hit crazy dives onto the pile outside, with Wild pulling a Sami Zayn and diving through the turnbuckle. Legado now gets the time to shine and they hit some tandem offense, including stereo coast-to-coast dives. They then turn their attention to taking Gibson out of the equation. The best thing about Legado's inclusion is that they're almost a blend of both these teams. They can match MSK's high-energy aerial offense while also going blow for blow with GYV. Legado takes advantage of GYV's absence by absolutely brutalizing Carter. Just like the Vengeance Day match, Lee is being isolated from the match. But his presence can only be prevented for so long. As soon as he's tagged in, it is an instant impact. He hits a pair of kicks to send Legado to the outside, hits a drop kick on Drake, dives onto Gibson on the outside, and then hits both members of Legado with a dive. Back in the ring, he hits another flipping Pele kick to take out Drake. MSK hit their patented moonsault maneuver, but it only gets 2. We see GYV attempt their Doomsday device to the outside on Lee, but Carter has learned from the last time, getting a running knee in at the last second to stop Drake. We get an impressive spot of Lee taking out both members of Legado and then taking out Drake. GYV work together to injure Lee's hand, and then Gibson locks Lee in a hand-based submission. Drake puts Carter in a submission as well, but Carter finds his way to Lee, crawling his way over. Lee is just about to tap when Carter stops him and keeps him from giving out. This buys enough time for Mendoza to interrupt both submissions. Legado hits a splash and driver combo to take out GYV. They then hit Lee with a double team move and get a close 2 fall. From this point, all 3 teams start brawling. GYV hits a huge Doomsday device on Wild, which included Drake leaping off the stage. MSK takes out Mendoza with a stomp and driver on the outside. On opposite sides of the ring, GYV and MSK lock eyes. The 2 teams meet in the middle and immediately start going at it. We see Carter reverse a ticket to Mayhem into a double cutter. This sets up MSK to hit their blockbuster finish. In their short tenure with NXT, MSK has become NXT Tag Team Champions. What I love about this match so much is that it highlighted all 3 teams involved. Even if it didn't seem like they were likely victors, Legado still got enough shine to make it a plausible finish. GYV constantly looked dominant and were obviously the team to beat in this match, and of course, MSK showed off their electricity and displayed their talent by reaching the mountaintop so early into their NXT careers. I started this script back when GYV had just announced that their contracts were up, so we now look to the present day when this video comes out, and they have already made their return, both with promos and a match at DPW Live 3. If you haven't checked out their promos that they have done since returning to the independent scene, I highly suggest checking them out. Rather than stick to the usual tropes we see from wrestlers when they leave their respective companies, they simply went out and continued to be themselves. One of my favorite lines from their recent promos is exclaiming that if one of them was ever dying, don't take them to the hospital. Take them to a wrestling ring because they were meant to be born and die inside of one. Overall, they're a fluid tag team that any company would benefit to have. Whether it is DPW, Defy, TNA, AEW, New Japan Pro Wrestling, or many others, they will instantly add to their tag team division. My only wish was that we got a payoff of some sorts to their feud with MSK. After that triple threat, they were involved in a fatal 4-way match for the titles but never faced off 2-on-2 again. However, these two have an insanely bright future with a plethora of new tag teams to face.